Okay. Can you guys hear me? Just want to. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get started. Again, I'd like to welcome everyone to our website portfolio workshop, run by our amazing technical team. I'll give them a second to introduce themselves. But like I said in the chat, if you guys have any questions during the course of this workshop, please try to keep it to the chat. If you guys have more concerns or questions, you can also head over to the troubleshooting session where we have more people that can help you. Without further ado, I would love to give it over to our technical team.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me first? Let's check the audio. All right, perfect. Yeah. My name is Yasmin. I will be one of the project devs co-hosting this workshop. I'm in my third year of electrical and biomedical engineering. I can pass it over to Sadia.
Hi guys, I'm Sadia. I'll be also working on this website portfolio workshop. I'm in my fourth year of electrical and biomedical engineering.
Hey guys, I'm Ahmed. I'm in my fourth year of electrical and biomedical engineering as well. Nice to have you guys attending our workshop.
All right, thank you everyone for the introduction. I will start sharing my slides. I just realized we're all like bio, but let me know once you see it. Can you guys see my slide? All right, perfect. Welcome to our portfolio workshop. For today, we're going to teach you how to code a website. We're mainly going to be using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Hopefully, you've heard about one of these languages at some point before you came today, but if not, that's okay because we will be starting from the basics. Now, just a quick agenda for the day. We're going to do a quick intro to HTML, the CSS, and JavaScript. We're going to do a quick intro as well to web development and what it entails. We're going to go over the framework of a website, so basic components and the building blocks of a website that we have. Ahmed will take us through a little tour on how we can style using CSS and how we can make our website responsive. We'll be taking a quick break if you guys need. Then we will start coding our own website. Sadia will go briefly about how you can deploy it. And then at the end of the slides, we have additional resources for you if you want to make your website a little bit more glamorous. So what you will need, obviously, if you're listening to me right now, you have your laptop. Hopefully, you're not on your phone. We've asked you already in our email to download VS Code Editor, as well as you need Chrome to run and test your website. Preferably, we want either a GitHub or a Gitlab account, so you can use that to deploy your website, as well as have Git installed. Now, before we move on, are there any issues that anyone is having with their installation process? We've asked you to install a few VS Code extensions, as well as VS Code. I don't see the chat, so if there are any troubleshooting, I'm assuming the other project devs will take care of that. Should I wait 5 minutes, or do you guys want me to move on? Let's see the chat. It doesn't seem like there's anyone who has a problem. So I will move on. All right. So let's start with what is HTML. If you didn't know already, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's very famously used to create web pages. It's also known markup language because we use a lot of tags to denote what we want the browser to do and how to display the content that we put between those tags. CSS is the cascading style sheet, and it's used to format your web page elements. And this helps you control things like color, font, background color, and images, size of text, spacing, your margins, a lot of things like that entails or is encompassed within your website. Lastly, we have JavaScript. It is often used to make your web page more dynamic, and in your code, it's usually denoted using the script tag. So you see that HTML uses uses tags, and then so does JavaScript. Now, just a quick intro to web development. This usually refers to the non-design aspect of a website. So we can use content management systems to make our content changes easier. So I think a few people can use Bootstrap or things like that. Websites can be either static or dynamic, meaning static, it's not very interactive. Dynamic means it interacts with your user. For today, we will be creating a static website. And in general, web developers usually like to consider usability and the accessibility of websites. So things like color contrast, putting alternative text for images, for screen readers, and things like that. So color contrast, for example, you don't want to have like white text over a white background. No one can read that. Or having a light blue background with like dark blue, things like that we need to keep in mind to make our website more user-friendly and more accessible. Beginning with a framework of website, most websites do have this format, sort of like where the header goes at the top, some sort of navigation if the website entails several tabs. Sidebar is usually for content that is not like the main purpose of your website or the purpose of that address. And then the main content would go somewhere in the middle that grabs the user's attention. Lastly, at the bottom, we have the footer. We usually include things like maybe company logo, when was the website last edited, and things like that. So within our header, usually in your HTML, you're going to notice a tag called head, and that's where the info about your website will go. Don't worry too much about it right now, but we will go further into details about those tags. Next, we have the body tag, and this basically kind of tells your website this is the main content, and this is what the user is going to see. The footer is also things that the user will see, and it includes anything that you want to put in the footer. That is up to you. Now, moving on to the building blocks of a website. Usually, this is a very, very simple website build. So I will be going over the most famous tags that we have here one by one, starting with our doc type. And this one basically tells the web browser what version of HTML that your page is going to be written in and how it can interpret the text that we've given. So you can see here, it says HTML, starts with HTML, ends with HTML, telling your browser again that everything in between those two tags, this is the beginning tag, and the end tag is usually denoted by like a slash, and that's how you know that's the end of the tag. And anything in between that is HTML. Next, we have the head. If you remember from a few slides back with the building blocks of the website, this is where the general information about the website appears. Most of the information that does go in the head is not seen by the user unless it's the page title. So like you can see here, the title, we don't have. If I were to run this code, for example, my page would be called example page. Other things that help connect your web page to the cloud will be included in the head, as well as the CSS file. You don't have to worry too much about it if you don't know it yet, but it's basically the file that helps you style the things that you are going to put in your body. And that's a really good segue now that we go into the body tag. Again, you have the starting tag and the ending tag denoting that everything in between is the body. And this is where like I said before, this is the main content of your website. Obviously, within that, you can have many headings, many paragraphs, images, anything that you would like. Just a simple example is a heading tag. Usually, like the biggest heading tags is H1, and then you can go through H1, H2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There are 6 different types of headings. I will show you it on the next slide. So this would be like the code. If I were to want to do 6 headings on my page, it would look something like this. And if I were to run the code, this is like the size. This is the default styling for those headings. Like I haven't done any CSS styling to them yet. This is the default. Lastly, we have the paragraph tag. And again, you can see it starts with a P, ends with a P, but the ending is denoted by a slash. And that's basically if you want to add any paragraphs, it holds content, but it wouldn't be as important as your headings. This is how it would look like on a web page if I were to run the code. Now I can pass it over to Ahmed. Let me just stop screen sharing.
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Right. Actually. Let me know when you guys can see my screen.
See it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Great. Right. So yeah, styling with CSS. So that's essentially like the HTML part is just mainly for the content, and here is like where you style your content. So there is 3 main ways in which you could add CSS to your web page. First is inline CSS. This is where you put it within the HTML tags, as you can see the example on the right here. But this is usually like not the best practice because you don't want to crowd your you don't want to put your content with the styling. And usually it's used when it's like very simple styling, like for example, you're changing just the color. Next, we have the internal CSS. This is where you put it in the head tags at the top of your web page. This is good because it separates the CSS from the HTML, but this would only apply the styling to the current web page. But if you have multiple pages for your website and you want to use the same styling, it's not the best way to do it. And then there's external CSS where you create a CSS file and then you link it using the using this code, like the link tag. Okay, so moving on to the syntax, it's pretty straightforward. So you have the selector, which determines what kind of which content you want to style, the declaration brackets, and then you have the property and the property values. So for the selectors, we have 4 types of selectors. We have the asterisk, which is like the universal selector. It styles everything, like all the HTML tags. So if you want to put all the margins for all your content to be 0, you could use this instead of individually changing every single HTML element in your document. We have the element or type. So like Yasmin went through the HTML elements. So if you want to change, like, for example, just all the paragraphs, you could just put the P tag and change the color of them. For example, here where the example on the right here is showing the strong tag, which is like bolding your content. But instead of just bolding it, we want to also change the color. So we put a color in there. Next, we have class. So this is if you want to be more specific when you're styling your elements. So you assign your element a class type. This is usually done within the HTML tag. You just do class name equals, and then we'll go through a bunch of examples later on. But for the CSS side, it's essentially the same thing. You just put the class name with a full stop character before it, and then you do the declaration brackets and the property and property values. And then lastly, we have the ID. This is very, but instead of a full stop character, you use a hashtag character, and it's used the same way as, as I said, it's used the same way as a class, but can only be it should only be used once per document. So like a good example would be like the navigation bar. You're not going to have multiple navigation bars in the same web page, so you would use the ID for that rather than a class. So some common CSS properties are display, width and height, the margins, borders, color, backgrounds, and fonts. So most of them are kind of straightforward, but we'll go through each one. For display, they take in many different values, but these are the ones like most commonly used and like the most straightforward in my opinion. So we have the block, inline block, inline, and none. So we'll start with the easiest. It's the none, which means your your container won't be displayed. So the div tag here, as we didn't go through it before, it's essentially like a container for your content, but all the other properties work the same. So none will not it will not show your container essentially. Next we have block. So it's like as the name suggests, like the block would it's just like a block. It's just gonna take up the whole width, regardless of the size of it. Like you can't put anything next to it. So they'll try to take as much space as they can, and they're not going to be placed like on the same horizontal line as any other display modes, essentially. Next is inline. Like a good example is like bold and italics, where you could display things inline. It's like the opposite of the display block property. And finally, it's the inline block, which is a combination of the inline and block. So it allows you to place like multiple blocks on the same horizontal line, but it will still try to take as much space as possible. So if we have three blocks, then they'll take up as like all the space next to each other. There's not going to be space between them, essentially. And yeah, so that's it for the display property. Moving on to width and height. So this is essentially like defining the width and height of your containers or your elements. The common units are like percentages, pixels, and pixels, like if we're using pixels, it will vary on how it looks depending on the screen size. Since some screens like have different numbers of pixels, like for example, a full HD screen will have like 1080 pixels as the width, as the maximum width, but like 4K would have like a lot more pixels than that, like 4 times that. So you have to keep that in mind when you're styling your web page. Next is the percentages. So this is percentage of the screen size essentially. And then there's auto, which is useful when you're doing stuff like margins, or if you want to center something, you could put like an auto unit. And then there is the EM unit. This one's a little bit confusing, but it's essentially like 1 EM is like your current font size. So if you put 2, it just multiplies that size by 2, and that's your size of like height or width, depending on what you're assigning it to. There's other useful properties like the max width. So if you have like, let's say you have like you assign the width a percentage, but you also want it to have a maximum width that it doesn't like get higher than that. It's because you don't want like the text to be very big or like the container to be very big, essentially. We'll go through some examples after this as well. Next is the margins and padding. So looking at the picture on the right here, we have our content, and then we have the padding on the outside, like next to the content, and then our border, and then the margins outside. So this is useful for spacing your content like accordingly. So let's say you have like a navigation bar and you want to separate the links a little bit apart. This is very useful to do that because you don't want all your content to be like directly next to each other. And yeah, like a good summary of that is just like the margins affect the area outside of the borders, and the padding affect the areas inside the border. And we have some like examples for how you would assign like values to the margins on the right here. So you could either do it on like one line with like assigning the top, right, bottom, and then left, or you could assign each one separately. Then next, that's the border. So for the border, we have like 3 properties that are most commonly used. We have the border width, which, as the name suggests, just like the width of the border, how thick it to be. It will take the same units as the width and height. Next is the border style. So this is like if you want to make your border like dashed, for example, or you just want a solid line around your container. And lastly is the border color. So this is just the color of your border. And yeah, you can also like specify what side your like which side of the border you want to have. Like you can have only like specific sides instead of all around your content. Like just the top, for example, or just the bottom, using like a dash between like border and top, for example, like here. Yeah. And next is color. So there are many different ways to input the color. We'll go through a few of them. So the easiest one is just to put like a color name, and there's a lot of like color names that HTML will accept. So like there's the basic ones, which is like blue, red, green. Then there's the HTML5 color names. I think you can look these up, but these give like a little bit more complex colors with the names. So you could go like with coral. And then there's hexadecimal if you want a very specific color that you chose. You put in the hexadecimal value. And then there is RGB, so it's the percentages of like red, green, blue. And then another useful thing is the opacity. So if you want it to be like a little bit more transparent, so it could show what's below it, you could do that as well. And yeah, next is the background. So for the background, you could have a background color, or you could also have like a background image. For the image, you would assign it like a URL or on where it is on your computer, essentially. And then background repeat and background position. This applies to your background image. So if you want, like, if the image is not doesn't fit exactly in the container, the same size as the container, you could have it repeat if the container is bigger, for example, or if the image is really big and you have that as the background of your container, you could adjust the background position to show like which part of the background you want inside the container, essentially. And yeah, so these the background position takes X and Y values, and same with the background. All right, and we have font. So the font, you can like style it very different ways. So we have the font style, so that's italics or normal usually, and then the font variant. So this is how you want your font to look. So like small caps or just like normal or all caps. It's not often used. The font weight is how bold you want your font to be. You could assign it values like normal, bold, bolder, or you could put in a number value between 100 and 900, and you just try out these numbers to see which one looks best. And then font size is how big you want your font to be. So it takes in the same like units as width and height. So you could put like a percentage or like a pixel value. Usually people use pixels for that. Then there's line height. So this is kind of similar to the padding around your content, but essentially it determines how much space above and below the text there is. This is like good to ensure good readability. It also takes in the same values as like the font size. And if it's like a unitless value, then the height will just be multiplied by whatever value you provided. And then I don't know why this is like covered by the logo, but yeah. So the last one is the font family. And this is like what type of font you so this could be like the name of the font, so like Helvetica and all those different like Arial, Calibri, the different types of fonts that you want your web page to display or to use. And you can find like a list of all the compatible ones for like different browsers online as well. And yeah, so moving on from all these like properties, we have like we could also make our web page more responsive with CSS. So like I mentioned, you could put like the width and height as just like pixels, but that will like make it look different depending on how big the screen is and how many pixels it has. So instead of that, you could use like minimum height elements and like percentages to make sure it looks readable and better on all your different devices. You could also use the add media rule to create different styles for each like device type. So like it would look different on like screen sizes that are smaller than like 300 pixels, or like if it's like if the device is like a phone or a tablet, you would be able to tell if it's in landscape or portrait mode and give different styling based on that. And yeah, so then next we have like you could also like assign different styling based on different actions the user takes. Like a simple one is like when you hover over a link, you can change the background color, like seen here in the example. And a last thing you could do is this is very simple, like JavaScript. We're not going to get into too much JavaScript today because it's a bit too much, but you can combine CSS and JavaScript to make your website react to certain events. So in the example here, we have an on-click function. So once you click on the element in your web page, it will trigger this event. And what this event does, it just changes the style color to red. But yeah, you could play around with that and make all the different styling you want. And yeah, let Sadia take over. Stop sharing my screen. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So somebody let me know if you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So now we're going to get to the part of the workshop where you can actually build your own website. And so the way that we're going to do this is by now you should have all downloaded all of the documentation that was shared in a Google Drive, and it can be accessed from the reception page of Hopin. And an important part of this Google Drive is a folder called Website Repository. And in it, we've basically shared a template in which you can put your own information for your website and obviously customize it with some of the skills and syntax that we just shared with you guys. But in order to get yourselves up and running, I'm just going to take you through a brief tutorial of how you're going to set it up using Gitlab, and then also be able to push your changes. So don't worry if you've never used GitLab or Git before, because we're going to be taking this like very step by step. And also Yasmin and Ahmed in the chat, if you guys can just field any questions, because I can't really see it while I'm presenting. But feel free to ask any questions, and if anyone needs to stop at a step, we can do so. So let's get started. So before we're going to do, or like the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a GitLab pages project. And for the purposes of this workshop, I used a GitLab account as opposed to a GitHub. I believe you can still do this on GitHub, but I chose GitLab. No worries if you don't have a GitLab account. You should be able to just convert your GitHub to a GitLab. So just for now, try and follow along with the GitLab specifications. So the reason that we're using pages is because GitLab has their own ability to deploy and run a website using their pages template. And with a free GitLab account, you can host one static website, I believe, per one free account. So the first thing you're going to do is navigate to your GitLab account and choose a new project. So if anyone has a GitLab account and wants to get started, please do so and try and follow along with the steps. If not, of course, the slides are being shared, so you can do this in your own time. But I kind of just wanted to take you through the little nitty-gritties with our own template. So you'll be clicking on a button that says New Project, and then you'll be choosing Create from Template. And this is important because, like I said, we're going to be using a GitLab Pages template, and that's like a critical part of how we're going to deploy our website. So once again, please choose Create from Template, and then they'll take you to a page where they have a lot of different kinds of templates to choose from. But ultimately, you'll be choosing Pages and plain HTML because that's how we're going to be coding our website. So if you can choose Pages/plain HTML, that would be perfect. And I'm just going to go through this quickly using my own GitLab account. So if someone can let me know if you can see my GitLab account. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So like I said, I'm just going to do a review of the last couple of steps. We have my own GitLab account with all of my projects. And I'm just going to navigate to New Project. And then you're going to choose Create from Template. And you should see all of these different templates. But we're going to choose Pages/plain HTML and just click Use that template. I'm just going to make it public just for the purposes of this. And I'll just call it something. It doesn't matter what you call your project name. It doesn't actually affect how your users will access your page. So I'm just going to call it Portfolio Workshop Trial. Because I have to make this different. And like I said, the project name doesn't actually matter to how your users will access it. So you can just make it whatever you want. And then we're going to go to Create Process. And it's importing a repository for this. Okay, perfect. So now you're going to see a bunch of files. So what you're first going to do is navigate to your public folder, and you're going to see two files, index.html and style.css. And because we use a template, GitLab provides these files for you. But because we're providing our own template, what we're going to do is we're going to delete these files because in the workshop repository that you should have downloaded off of Google Drive, these files already exist. So you don't need them provided by GitLab. And I'm just going to go back to my slides just so we can catch up. So once again, we're creating a GitLab Pages project. It's going to say Pages plain HTML. Then you've created your own GitLab project. And then once again, this is where you'll have your files pre-built. And those are the files that I just showed you, the index.html and the style.css. So every static website has to have these files. That's basically how your compiler runs and understands your website. So having those two files named in that way is critical to having your own website. But the reason that we're going to be deleting them from the GitLab Pages project is because from the Google Drive repository provided to you, those files already exist. So you don't need two copies of them. And so now I'm going to go back to GitLab and I'm going to show you how to delete these files. So you basically just click on index.html, and then you'll see your top bar where you can, edit this versus using their web ID. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to delete this file, and you're just going to delete it. And then you're also going to go to your style.css file, and you can see some basic styling that they provided for you because once again, this is a template. And then you're just going to delete that. Okay, perfect. So now you have what you should have in this file or in this project is just your gitlab.ciyyml file and your README, and those ones you can keep. So those ones are just cool to just chill there. And then let's go back to the next steps. So what you're going to do is you're going to clone your repository. And this is where having Git installed on your computer is very critical, because what you're going to do is you're going to, and I'm going to show this on my own screen, you're going to open terminal or command window if you're using Windows. I believe your text editor is called a command window, but I have a Mac, so I'll be using terminal, but I believe the commands should be the same. So I'm just going to show that as well. So first I'm going to go to GitLab, and you'll see this little button here that says clone. And I'm going to clone this via SSH. I don't think it matters which way, how you clone it. But if one doesn't work, just try the other. So I'm going to clone via SSH. So I have that downloaded, and then I'm going to just open up my terminal. So you should be able to see my desktop right now. And what you're going to do first is you're going to cd desktop, and this changes your directory to desktop. If anyone attended our Git workshop earlier this semester, these commands should be familiar to you. But basically all you're going to do is you're just going to change your directory to desktop, and then you're going to type git clone, and then just just paste the SSH key or the HTTPS link that you just copied from GitLab. And then now you'll be able to see that I just cloned a folder, and there should now be a folder on my desktop called Portfolio Workshop Trial. And now, so if you're following along, we have two folders. One is the one we downloaded from Google Drive that has the template that we provided for you. And the other one is your cloned folder from GitLab. So I'm just going to take a second now. Are there any questions in the chat? Please let me know. Yasmin or Ahmed, if there are any questions, could you let me know?
There's currently no questions.
Okay, cool. So that's great. So we're going to move on to editing the project on VS Code. So in order to have your files from the repository that we provided to you on your GitLab Pages project, which is a remote repository, you're going to be doing the following steps. So, and once again, I'll just take you through this very carefully. So we can close terminal up. We have website repository. We have that open, and we'll also open the portfolio workshop trial. And as expected, it only has the README folder because that's all that exists on the remote repository. So we're just going to copy this file, just drag it in here into your remote repository folder. And then now you'll have all of the HTML style CSS files that we provided for you guys. And then this will allow you to edit it in 1 second. So what you can now do is open up VS Code, and I'll open it on my computer, as you can see. Okay, perfect. So now we're gonna open a folder. So we're gonna open the folder that we just created from the cloned remote repository, and on my desktop that's called Portfolio Workshop Trial, and it's going to show up as the project name of whatever you created a couple steps ago, so it doesn't matter. So you're just going to open it up, and as you can see, your public folder is going to show up in green because those are new files that don't currently exist on your remote repository. And the next couple steps, I'm going to show you how to push those changes to your remote repository. So you can navigate to these files and you can see all of the assets that we chose for you guys, the About Me HTML. So now you can see some actual code that we provided for you guys. Here we have your name, first name, last name that you can now change and edit. But I'm just going to show you how you can push those changes to your remote repository. And when you push changes to your remote repository, you can then access them remotely, and that also comes into play when you deploy your website. So in those next couple steps, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the header, we're going to open up terminal, and we're going to have a new terminal, and then we're going to do the following commands. So we're going to do git add, and this means we're going to, add period, and that means we're going to add all of the new files from our that we just added to our folder that's not currently exists on the remote repository. So we'll do git add, then we'll do git commit, /m, and then we're just going to call our commit something new. So I'm just going to say pushing new files, and then that title is just going to be how you can update your changes. And then you can see all of the new files that I added to the remote repository will show up there. And the final command that we're going to type into the terminal window is just git push. And then it says that I pushed to the master branch. And these changes can be reflected now on your remote repository by going to GitLab. And I'll just refresh my page, and there you see it. All of the new changes that I made are now reflected on your remote repository. And you can see like my commit title is called pushing new files. And now you have the index HTML, the style CSS, as well as the other pages that we provided for you. So in this way, you can navigate back to this VS Code. You can make any changes you want to the HTML files we provided for you. So you can change this name, you can add your own resume here with your PDF. And then using those 3 commands that I just showed you, git add, git commit, and then git push, those can be reflected on your remote repository. Sorry, should I take a sec? Are there any more questions?
Actually, no questions in the chat. But maybe do you guys want to take a 5-minute break or? It's up to you, Sadia.
I'm just gonna quickly finish up what I have to say because I'm almost done the start coding section. So I'll just keep going through the slides. Once again, all of the steps are outlined in great detail in the slides provided. So feel free to do this on your own time. I just wanted to show you guys kind of live what the steps you have to do to use our template. So we're at editing your project on VS Code, pushing your changes. And as you can see, the 3 commands that I just outlined are there in text. So you can just copy and paste those into your terminal or command window, and then you'll be good to go. And then once again, you can see that I showed a little screenshot of the new commits, and then now they're reflected on GitLab. I'm just going to take a second to show you guys another feature of GitLab where you can where you can access your pages. So if you go to settings and general, you go to settings and then you navigate to pages, you can see where your pages are served under. So this is the link that GitLab provides to you. If you want to deploy your website to your own domain, there is a set of steps associated with that we also provided in the Google Drive, and it's called How to Deploy Your Website. But now you can see if I just click this link, this is the website based on the template that I pushed to GitLab. So you can see how from the beginning, I didn't have a GitLab project. I created a new project. I added the template files that we provided for you. And now by accessing this link, once again, it's you can access it under settings and then pages, and then it'll show you your pages are served under this domain. You can now see the actual website, and you can navigate to the different tabs that we provided for you guys. And once again, when you make these changes or make changes of your own to VS Code, you can push them to GitLab, and then they'll be reflected under this domain. So yeah, we can go ahead and take a 5-minute break now from anyone, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, cool. So once again, all of the steps are provided in the slides, and feel free to ask any questions now. I guess we can resume at around 3 p.m. and we can go into touring the actual templates that we provided to you. So just understanding certain features that we included.
Hey guys, I know you guys are on your break. You guys have been going a little bit hard, but in a minute, we will be posting our the feedback form in the chat. We would greatly appreciate your input as to regards how this workshop is going so far, what's your opinion on it, how we can improve. All of this information is very vital to us so that when we produce our upcoming workshops, we take all your advice in and we can make it a more or a better experience for you guys. So it would be really, we greatly appreciate if you guys can fill that out. It should be posted now. So if you guys can just fill that out before Yasmin, Sadia, and Ahmed resume again, that would be great. So that you don't have to worry about it after. Thank you guys.
Can you guys hear me? Yep. Okay. Perfect. Is the code readable for you guys, or should I zoom in a little bit more?
Maybe zoom in a little bit more.
Yeah, I can't see it, to be honest.
Is this better? Is this better or?
I think it is. If people could let us know in the chat if they see it or if they would like it more zoomed in, that would be great.
All right. All right, perfect. Great. Just start by looking at the website itself, like the web page, and then we'll go into the code. So here we have our home page, essentially just like an introduction page. And then we have our navigation bar and our titles, and then our social media links on the side here. Then about me page is where you could write a small paragraph about yourself, add a picture, and our projects page, which you could highlight the projects you've been working on. We have it here as a slideshow that you could put a picture of it and then like link that picture to your like GitHub page or your project page. And the last link here is your resume. Essentially, when you click at it, it should download a resume PDF. Right now, it's just an empty document, but you could put your own resume on it. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the template on the website side, but we're gonna look at the code on how we created this. All right, so here we have the title of our webpage highlighted. So as Yasmin mentioned, like this, like anything in the head, like wouldn't really show up except maybe for the title, but it will show up here for the tab. This is how like you would name your webpage. So you can go ahead and like change that. You put your own first name and last name, but I'm gonna put my own first name, last name, just to show how it changes. Actually, I think a step before that, so that you can see the changes right away when you open up the web page. You gotta right click and then open with live server, and then that will allow it to change as you save your code. Make changes to your code and save it. It will change. So once I click save, go back here and it's changing. And you can see here the title has changed. All right, so that's it for the title. And then here we have our link to the CSS page, CSS coding styling sheet. And then we have our body with the div class here is just a container. We just wrapped everything in one big container and we did some styling on that container. Here we have the header, which is just this right here. So you can go ahead and change that to your first name and last name. You could keep the word portfolio there if you like, or not. And then here's our links, your social media links. So you could put your own Twitter account, you could put your email, and your LinkedIn account, your GitHub page if you would like. And if you don't like the icons we chose, you could also put your own icons by downloading like the images for the icons and putting them in your assets folder, and then linking them here using the IMG tag. So the way you link it is you put src and then you start typing in the path. So I'm just gonna redo that here. So once you type in assets, it kind of automatically fills it in, and then you get to pick from a list of items here. So since we're interested in the Twitter one, we click on it, and if you save, it should update. So that's for our social media links on the side. Then here we have our navigation bar. And so we have it like just as 4 different links. So the first link just links to the home page, which is our index.html. Second one is the about me. Third one is the projects, and so on. You could change what they're called over here. And for the resume, you can link it the same way we link the image. So essentially, you just type in the pathway, and it should be linked once you save. And yeah. Yeah, so this is our so let me go back to our web page. So on our home page, once you refresh, you can see a little bit of an animation here. So the way we did that is we used a little bit of JavaScript we found online. So you don't have to like type in like JavaScript from scratch. So there's a lot of resources online that you could use. So as Yasmin mentioned at the beginning, to type in JavaScript, you could use the script tags and then put in your JavaScript code and then close your script tag at the end. And then if you want to change the animated text, you can change it here. You could type in I'm an engineer, whatever else you like. All right, that's essentially it for our index. The about me and projects are very similar. The only difference is in the main part, the main content. So for the about me, we have, instead of the JavaScript animated text, we have an image, a headshot image that we linked. So you link it the exact same way as we saw in when we were doing the icon part. You just start typing in the pathway, and then you could write a small paragraph about yourself. So here, let me see. That's essentially it for the about me, and for the projects, it's also very similar. It's the only difference is right here, the slideshow containers. So you could change the link that it's linked to, and you could change the image right here. And since there are 3 of them, you can also you should change the other 2 as well. You could also add more by just like copying and pasting that one block, essentially. But yeah, so that's essentially like a tour of our HTML code. I will look at the CSS. So let's start with something like here, where is it? The body, okay, I think. So our main container here, we have the height set as 400 pixels, right? So a way to make this a little bit more, I guess, like reactive to what the content is, maybe we want to put this as minimum height instead. But I'll show you why like having just 400 is not like the best idea. So just give me a second. So I'm just gonna so instead of this right here, I'll just put in a big paragraph. Right, and save that. And let's go to the about me page. As you can see, because there was a lot of text, it went and the site was only set to 400 pixels, the text overlapped the footer we have at the bottom. So that's why like having a set like height isn't very good for our purposes. But instead, what we could do is we could set a minimum height. And once we save that, go back, it automatically moved the footer for us. So that's one way of like making your website a little bit more reactive. Another way is we have this wrapper, which essentially just wraps everything around here so that it stays in the middle. Right, so what we did to the wrapper is we put the left margin and the right margin as auto. That way it would center it. But we also gave it a set width of 1024 pixels. But if we, for example, make this web page a little bit smaller, we decrease the width, you can see that not everything shrinks with it. It just gets covered. And then there's a scroll bar. So what we could do instead to make this a little bit better, we could put a percentage, so 80%. So this will make this a lot more reactive, as you can see. So it changes with the size of the web page. And yeah, so from here you guys could just like change the color, the height, and whatever else you like to make this website your own in a unique way. And yeah, if you guys have any questions or would like me to show anything, I'll be happy to do that.
While we wait for some questions in the chat, I just want to say a quick thing about the last and final aspect of your website creation, which is outlined once again in the handout, How to Deploy a Website. So basically, deployment of your website is just like creating a domain in which you can link people and how your users will access your website. And in the handout, I went through the steps of specifically deploying your website using GitLab pages and Google domains. And now typically people for portfolio websites will just make it their name, or maybe like your name portfolio.com. And if you go to Google domains, a domain name is it's about $17 a year. So you really only want to purchase it when your workshop or your website is like fully functional. You have all of your up-to-date information, and then you can go live essentially. And then you can, link it to employers, link it to whomever, and then they can access it from their own browsers. So once again, all of the steps for deployment of websites using Google domains and GitLab pages is outlined in the handout, How to Deploy Website, which is also in the Google Drive provided, and that should have been emailed to you. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that fact when you guys get to that step. Obviously, not today, but in the future when you want to deploy your website, there's a bit of a cost associated to it, but that's up to your own discretion. But anyway, if there are any other questions, feel free.
you have any questions, you can type them in the chat. We do have another segment starting. Software consulting company known as Phaes Solutions will be coming in to give you guys a talk about the industry. So if you want to stay until then, feel free. But until 3:30, we will be taking questions. So if you want to try and get your website working on your own, but if you come across any trouble or you don't know how to change a specific thing in your code in the template, feel free to type in the chat, and we're more than happy to help you.
Hey guys, just to echo what Yasmin has been saying, Saudia, Ahmed, and Yasmin will be here to answer your questions if you guys have any for the workshop. So thank you for attending the technical aspect. But if you have more, we do have more at 3:30. Phaes Solutions, our industry partner that we're going to be working with, will be coming, and we'll love to answer any questions that you may have and have a short presentation ready for you guys. So I do highly recommend you guys staying a little bit longer, just so that you can see and get a chance to interact with Phaes Solutions. But yes, in the meantime, if you have any questions related to the actual workshop itself, we have our technical team here and in our troubleshooting session to help you guys out.
Okay, so here's a few things that talked about earlier about the background properties. So at the top we have the color. So an easy a way to change the color to what you like is you could just hover over the color and you could just pick whichever color you like from here. Right now we have the image. If you guys don't like the image, you could link it the same way as I showed earlier. And we have it as cover, but we could also change that to to be different kind of sizes. So I think you could change the height for it. But we'll leave that as cover, but also change the repeat. So if we have it as repeat and we save, and then let's create, then you can see that the image repeats at the end here. So that's just a couple of things of what I talked about earlier. For the navigation bar, we have it as a, and we like made it a little bit transparent in the footer and the navigation bar. So the way we did that is you get to pick your color. So here we had as a black color, and then you can change the opacity right here. And yeah, most of the CSS we have is pretty straightforward. The only thing that I wanted to show you guys was at the end here. So here, this is us creating the animation for the JavaScript part. And what most people do at the end is they use that at media function right here. So to create other types of to set different properties for styling your web page. So essentially here, this one is for the maximum width of 300 pixel. So maybe like a phone screen or like a very small screen. And you get to essentially change some of the properties that are up here. So for us, we only changed these three properties. So the property, the classes previous, next, and text, which are used in our projects page. So our website, so our template isn't very optimized for phones yet, but like you guys could play around with that and make sure you make your website reactive to different phone screens and or different like screens in general. Makes it very readable as well. And yeah, yeah, here's the font family that I went over earlier. So I think the Visual Studio Code also like provides you with some different font families. Like once you start typing, it gives you some suggestions. Yeah, there is a lot of properties you could play around with to make your website like your own, essentially, with your own different colors, your own icons, and yeah, whatever else that will make this like more yours, I guess. And yeah, so if you guys have any questions, please ask them. We'd be happy to answer them.
If you guys have any more questions, we still do have our troubleshooting session open. Feel free to ask any of your questions there. If not, I would like for you guys to direct your attention to Phaes Solutions. I'll let them introduce themselves. If you have any questions regarding to them, you have the chat. So I'll let you guys take it over.
Thanks so much for the intro. I'm just going to start by sharing our screen. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm assuming you guys can see the presentation. We'll start off. So thank you for the introduction. So we are Phaes Solutions. So we'll just go a little bit about myself and my colleague Ervin here, just a little bit more about ourselves personally. So yeah, my name is Christian, and just a little bit about my background. I was actually born in the Philippines, and I moved to Canada around the age of 10. Attending McMaster, I'm in mechatronics engineering, and it's a little confusing, but I'm between 3rd and 4th year as of right now. And starting January 2019, I believe, I will be completing 2 years of co-op and internship experience at different companies by the end of this December. A little fun fact about myself, I competed as part of the Team Canada in multiple Taekwondo World and Pan Am Championships.
Yeah, and a little bit about myself. So my name is Ervin. I'm actually in my final year of biomedical and electrical engineering here at McMaster. I've been developing software for the last 5 years. My passion for software really started right here at McMaster. And I have a great passion for all things tech, anything from machine learning to blockchain. I really love touching everything. And just a little fun fact about myself is I love to play basketball.
Cool. So just a little overview at some of the places that myself and Ervin have worked over the last couple of years in terms of like co-ops and internships. So for myself, I started at a firm out of North York called H.H. Angus. I then moved on to IBM, and then from IBM, I moved on to Amazon. And then from Amazon, I'm currently working at RBC.
Yeah, and then for me, myself, just like Christian, but I started off at RBC. From RBC, I then worked 4 months at Ontario Power Generation. From there, I then moved to a great startup out of Toronto called FreshBooks. And then from FreshBooks, I went to my most recent internship, which was at Google. Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, so just a little bit about Phaes Solutions and what we do as a business. So Phaes Solutions essentially is focused entirely around being a small business engine that helps self-employed individuals as well as small businesses grow on a digital platform. So what do we mean by that? There are a wide variety of individuals who do not have a digital presence, nor do they have digital marketing and things like that. And we really want to help them grow and reach out to people on that scale. So things that we do more specifically are digital marketing, website development. We also do some level of mobile development and logo design.
So a little bit more about our journey and how we came upon Phaes Solutions. So honestly, for myself, and I believe for Ervin as well, the first instance of formal programming language that we were taught at a formal course was actually at McMaster with 1B04, teaching us the basics of Python programming. And prior to, I've had zero programming experience, nothing in high school due to like the program I was in. I wasn't able to reach out and do any comp sci courses. So officially speaking, 1D04 was my first course in learning any type of programming language. And from then on, it was actually the summer of 2018 where I actually worked at my first startup out of Forge, one of McMaster's incubators. And that's actually when I first met Ervin. And then from then on, our journey continued with our first hackathon at that same fall of 2018.
Yeah, and our first hackathon was actually all the way out in Baltimore, where we, for some reason, missioned for 36 hours to get to there. We competed there, and that's where Christian and I really became friends. We grew a lot closer. And then, as we mentioned, we both had our first co-ops in the winter of 2019. And then our most recent summer of 2020 was really our first big break, I guess you could say, and Christian securing an internship at Amazon and myself securing an internship at Google. And then that's when we really started to carry out our passion for wanting to pursue something on our own. And we officially launched Phaes Solutions as of fall 2020. And the rest is to be continued. And hopefully you'll see us out there sometime soon.
So just a little bit about the struggles and successes that we find that weren't too publicized in our journey of creating a startup. So some of the successes that we've come across has actually been acquiring clients consistently over the last few months. Seeing as that we launched in September, we were expecting more of like a slow linear growth in terms of client acquisition over time. But to our surprise, it was actually pretty consistent right off the bat. And this is something that we weren't expecting initially due to like our marketing strategies and the campaigns that we want to put in place over time. But it was definitely a blessing in disguise, and it helped us and forced us to kind of ramp up the pace a little bit and understand how to manage our time a lot better with different clients and how to project manage different projects at the same time. And that is why we attribute to our launch in September, early September, being a successful one. And currently, we're actually in full stride helping businesses all around the world. From we actually have a couple of clients out east in the PEI, and as well as far as Australia. So yeah, that was a fun one to hear when we heard our website and our reach was all the way into the south side of the world.
Yeah, and just some struggles that I think are relatively common among small businesses and businesses that are just starting up. One thing is that Christian and I have actually never run a business before. There's a lot more administrative and accounting things that we didn't really take into consideration that we're getting a lot better at now, that obviously we didn't know at first. So it's really just been a learning curve in that regard. And finally, we're both managing school, work, and running a full-time business right now. So it can get kind of busy. The time management is definitely very difficult. But with that being said, we love doing it and we love the hustle. So.
Yeah, so just a little overview on the web development and what you guys learned today and potentially the next step to take from here on a web development and a more like just a software development in general.
Yeah, so just to sort of touch on the role development of web development in Phaes. So first thing that we really wanted to stress on was that majority of Phaes clients have wanted web development. So we talked about the 4 major pillars that Phaes operates under in being logo design, app development, web development, as well as digital marketing. Majority of our clients, I would say on the order of 75%, come from web development. So that's just sort of to demonstrate to you guys the demand for this skill set in today's marketplace. And everything, and again, we do everything from company websites to web apps, and that's what we get, what's required of us. And just to tag along off of that, some of the people that we've worked with and companies that we've worked with include realtors, appraisers, so real estate appraisers, some self-employed individuals, and some just individual hustlers / entrepreneurs who really want to grow their digital presence. So hopefully what you guys could take away from this slide in particular is that there is a huge and crazy demand for the skill set that you guys are learning today in this workshop.
For sure. And on a more personal note, and as on a side note of Phaes, so as for my personal co-op experience, I can easily and safely say that every co-op experience I had, whether it be any backend, full stack, cloud development, required some sort of web development. And that's just to emphasize the fact that it is prevalent in almost 90% of the software jobs that you will get or acquire in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, so just to talk about next steps for you guys and how you guys can sort of take the information that you've acquired in today's workshop and sort of extend upon it and further your skill set and your arsenal in the area of web development and software. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so for what we learned today and why it's important, basically, number one thing is that the core foundation to any web development you will ever tackle in the future is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And like these are one of the most important and one of the most embedded into web development today. And yeah, more recently, there are alternatives to these using these languages, but any tool that you may use, any framework you may use that involve web development will always involve these 3. And if you have a core understanding of these 3 languages or these 3 components to web development, then you have a solid beginning and a solid foundation right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we also really wanted to stress is like how easy it is to get started. One of the first things that I can say I did, and I'm pretty sure Christian did as well, was create our very own website, our portfolio website where employers and members of HR could go and they could really see a holistic view of us as candidates, projects we've done, experiences we've had. And it really, really is a great way to help your application stand out, as well as to really hone your ideas and hone your skill set and present them in a very fashionable way. Not to mention as well, it doesn't really cost much to do this. GitHub provides you guys free hosting for any site. So a simple HTML, CSS site will be provided with free hosting, and you can put up your site and start sending them to employers right now.
Yeah, and the last thing you want to take from this workshop is just basically, even if you forgot all of the syntactical information that you learned today, I'd much rather you leave the workshop inspired more than anything. Because out there, if you understand the actual potential that what you've learned today, or even little bits of what you learned today, there are way too many resources out there to come up with an excuse to say that I don't know something. So that's a lot, like even in hackathons and stuff like that, a lot of the grind for these certain concepts and these certain languages are from online resources like YouTube, Udemy, Coursera, and just Google in general. And like, there's so many things out there that are easily accessible. And with my major being mechatronics and his being electrical and biomedical engineering, software is not a huge, or maybe a core, it is a core component, but it's not a huge component of it. Seeing as like my first language was Python, my second language learned in formal education was C, and then I just made a complete pivot personally to learn web development from there on out.
Absolutely. Yeah, so sort of just tag off of that and just sort of iterate for you guys what we feel like very, very valuable next steps are. So just to start from like the very top, you guys can take the HTML, CSS, JavaScript components of what you guys have learned and extend that to really, really popular industry standard frameworks such as React, Angular, and Vue.js. So across numerous different companies from Google to Facebook to Amazon, some of the most popular UI frameworks are React, Angular, and Vue. The most common thing between the three of them is that they all require a very core and fundamental understanding of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So these fundamental skills that you have acquired, hopefully throughout this workshop, are very, very important and instrumental in going on further in your career.
For sure. And like as I was mentioning earlier about the alternatives, more recently Python, there's a framework based off of Python called Django that allow people to develop for web develop in Python programming language with its own backend or its own related frameworks. So yeah, there is that alternative. But I think one of the most important things to take away from this is, yeah, you'll see a lot of suggestions that we might make. Like, for example, you have the 3 React, Angular, and Vue, the top JS frameworks. I think the most important thing is to not be the master of all, but to commit to one and try to perfect it to the best ability. You can spend however long always trying to see, oh, what's the most popular today? But I'll be honest, React was nothing 5 years ago, and React is one of the most popular now. So in the next 5 years, it could still be React, it could not be. So I think don't try to play off like, oh, I just have to find the most valuable talent to add to my arsenal. I think if you commit to something and you perfect that skill, you will be an asset to any company in the future.
Absolutely. So then to go off of that, we can talk about now mobile app development with things like React Native and Flutter. So these are really, really cool frameworks because they actually allow for cross-platform development. So you can develop for iOS and Android apps directly within one framework, which is why they're actually very popular among startups nowadays. You can also develop natively, obviously, in Swift. So Swift for iOS and Java for Android and Java and Android Studio. So you can develop for Android. And the fact of the matter is a lot of these frameworks, once again, use concepts that are in JavaScript or something similar to HTML and XML or something like that to manage dependencies / manage UIs. So again, the skill set that was acquired today is very, very fundamental in the extension to mobile app development.
For sure. And just to round it out, just to get you a better perspective on like what a full stack or a backend developer would do, definitely some things to look into if you haven't already are Java, JavaScript, Ruby on Rails, and Python. Java being one of the oldest and the most embedded into our industry today is a core aspect of a lot of full stack development. And with JavaScript and Python on the come up and Ruby on Rails very new, these are all different tools and frameworks and languages that can help you round out your skill set in terms of being a full stack software developer.
Yeah, and then some other concepts that we think are really, really important for certain individuals are.
Yeah, so for the number one thing I definitely suggest you look into to be a proper web developer in the future and to take your level to the next step is REST APIs. REST APIs are one of the most important and one of the most sought after skill today. I've almost not gone through an interview without an API being mentioned once. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but REST APIs allow for the communication between different processes and different server-side applications, and it just helps a lot with the timing and the communication because not everything can be processed in one area in one location. So definitely look into this REST APIs as a concept and look in how to implement it in whatever language or framework because you can implement them using anything. You can implement them using Java. You can implement them using in React with JavaScript. So it's all dependent on what you use, but just the concept of REST APIs in general is something that is a core component of today's web developers.
Yeah, and to go off of that and maybe a little bit more of a tangent in these frameworks called Docker and Kubernetes, and they're very much on the come up, especially in the cloud when it comes to like GCP and AWS. But the reason we want to stress them is because they're very, very important frameworks in understanding the larger scale of web development when it comes to containerization, running your web apps in complex web development, dynamic web apps on a VM. These are very, very important concepts to understand. So Docker and Kubernetes are definitely things we highly, highly recommend you guys look into as they sort of expand their way into the software development marketplace and are more widely used across startups and some of these bigger companies.
For sure. And lastly, and one of the most important is databases. Databases are something you definitely need to look into, and the certain things, whether it's the concepts behind them, especially SQL versus NoSQL or SQL, whichever you prefer, and relational versus non-relational. Like these are certain things that'll be important because you do have to store something somewhere. So then databases are the perfect tool for that. So get to know the differences and why people would use why someone would use a relational versus a non-relational, or why different databases are used and others aren't, and like just the different ones. And there's usually the databases that exist today are different combinations of these key attributes per se, like Mongo and Postgres and MySQL. Like these are all databases in itself that either are relational or non-relational, or either use SQL or not SQL.
Yeah, so I know that we've sort of gone over a lot of information with this slide, especially considering like all these different frameworks we've mentioned. One thing that at least I've noticed in particular, and I'm pretty sure Christian would agree with me, is that probably the best way for people to start learning these things is to get your hands dirty and start trying to make a project. Think of a project, think of something really, really cool that you want to implement, and start extracting away the layers. Okay, what am I going to make for my front end? All right, we're going to use React. Then we're going to go for my back end. We're going to use Python Flask. And then we're going to go for our database. We're going to use a relational database in SQL. And then you're going to slowly attack some of these different things and tick them off as you build a cool project. A, you're much more motivated to build a really, really cool project. And you're not going through a really, really boring course that has numerous amounts of irrelevant information. And B, you're getting your hands dirty and you're building something really cool. So something very, very similar to what you guys did in your workshop today, I think is the most effective way to learn.
For sure. So I just wanted to talk about like how we can kind of help you guys, the people who attend in the workshop and stuff like that, how we want to give back. So one of the things is that we want to offer this basically a career mentorship program, because what we found a lot, and especially being in majors that are not super software focused, is that there's a lot of questions up in the air. There's a lot of uncertainties. Like again, what I was saying earlier, sometimes you're just like, okay, should I learn this? Should I learn this? Should I spend time on this? So a lot of that is it takes up a lot of time, and that's something we can definitely save, and we can help you in that sense, that we can help clear up some uncertainties to the best of our abilities for sure. So that's why we want to offer this time, or basically for the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be running meetings for anybody that's interested, and we could talk about anything from like career direction or co-ops, or how to approach co-ops or resumes, or even just starting your own venture. So that's something myself and Ervin, being the founders of Phaes Solutions, would love to help give our 2 cents about. Or if you have any questions about us that you'd like a little more clarity about, and how we approached our path into the software world. So yeah, feel free to use that link if you guys want to book any meetings. I'll show the link later at the end of the slides, but yeah, that's just something we want to mention.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely what Christian and I wanted to focus on was the fact that McMaster's provided us a lot of our success, and the opportunity to perhaps give back in any way that we can is something that we'd love to be a part of. So we really look forward to meeting you guys, hopefully on a more personal level, understanding your guys' goals and your career goals, and hopefully playing somewhat of a role in helping you guys get to where you guys want to get to.
For sure. So I guess that's basically the whole spiel that we had for you guys. Feel free to reach out to us. Our LinkedIns are on those QR codes, and then Phaes Solutions, I believe that's our website. So feel free to reach out to us if you guys want to message us, if you have any questions. And you can also visit our website if you guys have anything that you would want to see, or how we approached it. You can see basically our motto, our story on how we created Phaes Solutions. And yeah, you can find us on all the social medias, Instagram, Twitter, at Phaes Solutions. And you can also connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn on a more personal level. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. And yeah, here's that link in case people are interested in joining and meeting up with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. One of the main things we wanted to incorporate in this workshop was not just the technical aspect, but showing to our McMaster community that students from our years and from our school can accomplish so much. So, for me, Ervin and Christian have been huge inspirations, and hopefully for you guys too. So I definitely do recommend you guys connecting with them. If you don't have any questions right now, you need, maybe you want to look into it a little bit more and have questions later. Both Ervin and Christian have gone out of their way to set up meetings to connect with you guys on a more personal level. And I would definitely take advantage of that. So if you guys don't have any questions, we'll be here for the next, let's say till 4. Technical related or to Phaes Solutions, pop it in the chat, and we'll try to answer to our best of our ability. But again, thank you, Phaes Solutions. Thank you, technical team, for working so hard to get this thing up and running. So I'm really happy that everything went well. And thank you guys for attending our workshop.